Well, we call it the business of agriculture because, after all, we talk about business. And what's more pertinent to business than money? Well, nothing. So that's why we've got on the Director of Sales and Marketing with Nutrien Financial today to talk to you about money and agriculture, where things are, a snapshot of farm finances, what to look forward to into the middle part of 2023 and harvest 2023. That's what we're talking about today on the Business of Agriculture. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of the Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field. Then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. It's me, your host, Damian Mason. You knew that. I've got John Maman. John is the Director of Sales and Marketing with Nutrien Financial. You know about Nutrien. They're a pretty big company out here. Number one ag retailer in North America, as I recall reading once. Well, they're also on a financial side. And so I thought, let's talk about farm finance. Let's talk about where things are. Let's talk about money and agriculture. And that's why I've got John on here. John's a Purdue guy like me. He's actually an Indiana resident, but he covers a pretty large swath. So what do you cover so that people say, wait a minute, is he just talking about finances there? No. Nutrien Financial, global, national? What are we talking about?
Thanks, Damian. So Nutrien Financial does have a presence across our retail footprint. There's a separate operating model in Australia, but I manage our North American sales and marketing for Nutrien Financial that covers our retail business. Those are the retail operations that you see as Nutrien Ag Solutions in the U.S. and Canada. And our goal is to really bring that farm-focused agronomics that our Nutrien Ag Solutions branches bring and pair it with, again, farm-focused economics that provide the best terms, rates, and incentives and overall awareness so our growers have the ability to plan for the known and the unknown in the marketplace. And we've seen a lot of both in the last year.
So, John, you're loaning money to retailers? No, you're loaning money to farmer customers from the retailers.
Our lines of credit are for our end-use customers through Nutrien Ag Solutions.
Yeah. So I buy $1 million worth of ag inputs from my local Nutrien dealer, here in Huntington, let's say, and I say, well, I got farm credit note, I've got a loan from my local bank, and you say, you know what, we can also do in-house financing. So that's how it works with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in all honesty, it's meant to complement your operating line. I think in any market conditions, really the benefits lie in liquidity and the ability to pivot, to use certain lines of credit when they mean the most for you. And sometimes I see the biggest opportunity is just awareness in the marketplace to know where your money can best work for you so that you can make the best decisions for your operation.
So let's talk about money first thing. You're a lender, as well as a retailer, and we've seen this quite a bit. John, you worked for John Deere; they have a financing arm. So the equipment companies have financing arms. The ag retailers, like you, have a financing arm. It seems like a few other ag companies that I might buy their products would finance me as well. This is kind of a big growth area. It started 30 years ago, 40 years ago, like GMAC. You didn't just buy a car, you also borrowed money and they made money off of that. This is kind of a model that's 20, 30 years old, right?
Yeah, I would agree. And having those in-house captive finance companies is really a means to connect with the customer. And you mentioned a number of different companies that do that. The overall goal is to provide simplicity for the consumer and making sure that they have the one-stop shop opportunity so that they go in and they speak to the individual that they like to manage that relationship with, and that individual has all the resources at their fingertips to make the process and that relationship easy. Because at the end of the day, financing shouldn't be one other impediment to an overall positive buying experience. It should be a compliment.
Right. So you borrow money from somewhere and then pass it on in that regard. This is not rocket science. Are you making more money loaning money because now the cost of money, interest is 2.5 times what it was? Does that mean that you're making 2.5 times as much, or does your margin stay the same?
The margins vary based on market and conditions, as you know. One of the things that Nutrien Financial does is it's our in-house financing, so it's part of our internal balance sheet. If you look at our annual returns, those are published. But at the end of the day, our goal is to take our relationships in the marketplace and use those to be able to leverage the best offers for our growers, and those come with partnerships from a lot of our strategic suppliers. And so we partner with other large ag companies, those strategic suppliers and products that we sell through Nutrien Ag Solutions, to offer best-in-class rates. And in all honesty, a lot of the value that we bring is from our balance sheet to be able to lend that amount, to be able to do it on an unsecured basis so that we don't impede the operating line that you referenced, but also using our strategic suppliers' influence to be able to offer promotional rates that are best in class. And so it's really a triangle of value around our customers. If you look at Nutrien Ag Solutions providing the expertise, our strategic suppliers in many cases offering those promotional rates through us, and then Nutrien Financial providing the unsecured line of credit that doesn't impede an operating line. And I think that's what's truly important in the marketplace, because as you know, we mentioned liquidity and having the ability to pivot when you need it. The one thing that impedes that ability to pivot are unnecessary liens and interferences with your ability to use that money. And the other really lies in just the variability in the interest rate market too, which we can always talk about.
Answer me. Okay, before we talk about variability and interest, let's talk about the way it works. You said unsecured twice. I got a note against my farm mortgage. I've got a line of credit that I use for everything from buying my diesel fuel to parts, who knows what. And then I go to you and I buy my supplies, and you say, all right, you've got $1 million, $500,000 worth of crop inputs. We'll finance that. Do I shop that rate? Is your rate comparable to anybody else? How does this work? Or am I just doing it as the convenience factor? And you also talked about it being unsecured. Well, you're not going to give me, you're going to be a little bit more protective of that because you got nothing to come against me other than me, right?
Well, from an unsecured perspective, in most cases, we aren't asking for crop liens, and that's a benefit of this. Now,
they are not. In most cases,
we are not. That's correct. And so, those crop liens, and there are times where we might have to be if we're the only lender in that relationship. But in most cases, we're not, because again, your operating line is your primary source of repayment for your operation. With respect to rates, again, we offer standard rates that are competitive in the marketplace. We also have promotional rates that are tied into our seed and chemistry suppliers that offer those incentives in the marketplace. What I can tell you with respect to rate is that yes, we are as competitive or better when you look at an overall blended rate in the marketplace versus your operating line. You mentioned that 9.3. I think you'd be surprised if you sat down and built a crop plan with us and how competitive we can be. But the most important piece of that is just lies in the details, right? You look at your operating line. The reason it changed was it's variable. It's based on prime, and prime has changed 10, 11 times in the last 14 months. And for anybody,
which historically, John, is not normal. I mean, it's not okay. I'm sorry, it changes, but it has not changed with the degree of change that it is, and by the percentage amount change. This has not happened for 3-4 decades, right?
Well, you look at the way prime has changed over the last 5 years. It's been as stable as a variable rate gets. Now, if we go back a couple decades, anybody who listens that lived through the 80s, late 80s,
Yeah.
90s knows, and that variability in which interest rates can follow. Those are some scary times. I've been in the marketplace during the Great Recession and in different industries when we saw construction markets and housing crashes and everything else, and rates came down after that. But you're correct in saying in the last 5 or so years, those rates haven't changed a lot. And whether you're lending for agricultural purposes, whether you're buying a home, looking at other just credit situations, rates have been fairly stable. And so the shock to the system that we've seen over the last 14 months is real. It means a lot to the bottom line for our consumers. It means a lot when you estimate what your gross profit is going to be for putting on a crop, and then you see the rapid change, 4.75% in the last 14 months. That's real money. Just in the increase in prime.
Okay, so 4 point. I want to. That's where I want to go with this. Okay, you said that I mentioned 9.3. That was before I hit record. So for the listener that's saying, "What's he talking about?" I have in my hands right here my notice from Farm Credit Mid America, where I have a line of credit. I don't access it typically, but it went from 9.1 to 9.35. My new interest rate starting June 1st is 9.35%. This number was in the 4 range a year and a half ago. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. I look back at March 15th, 2022. Prime was 3.25%. Then on March 16th, it went up to 3.5%. And since then, it's risen steadily 10 or 11 times up to 8.25%. And so
is my number from Farm Credit typically about 1 point higher than prime?
Yeah, that's fair for what the market is. And again, everything depends on collateral. It depends on liens and other things that your primary operating lender would take to secure that operating note. But that's a fair market rate, I would say, in what we see in today's marketplace.
Sure. So when you think about this, and by the way, you said something that I've pointed this out to a few different groups. You said interest rates went up by 4.75%, but the cost of money went up by 100%. The rate went from 4 to 9.3 or 4.5 to 9.3, but that's a doubling of the cost of money. So, when you think about it that way, if diesel went from $3 to $6, that went up 100%. Well, if you looked at money as an input, which it is, money as an input cost has doubled in value, has doubled in price.
Yeah, that's where some of our savviest growers that I've visited in my career have made references to cash being just another commodity. And if you have cash and terms, and you know how to leverage those at the right time,
I want to point this out. You're the financial guy here, but I want to point out, I say this because I think it helps clarify. If I tell everybody, I'm like, all right, you're in the ag business. You need diesel, fertilizer, herbicide, fungicide, biologicals, seed, etc. You also need money. So you always think I'm buying seed, feed, chemicals, fertilizer, inputs, but they don't think of I'm buying money because they're borrowing it. But I'm saying, but look at what the cost of it is. So that's where I'm saying that I try to help people when they say, well, I really like the production side of stuff, I'm not really good with the money side. I'm like, you used to give 4% to buy that money to use it as an input. Now you're paying 9% to buy that money to use it. And that's, I think, very helpful to folks that aren't financially minded.
I would agree. There has to be a return on the money, just as there's a return on the crop.
Exactly. So, that's where once I tell them that, then it's like, imagine you're buying that loan to use that money just like you use fertilizer and you use seed. And then that seems to help a lot of folks, in ag or out of ag, understand that you're basically paying for the money as a crop input.
You're absolutely right. And I think back to just exactly what you said, where people in a certain industry want to do what they're comfortable with. Farmers want to farm, right? But the further one gets in their profession, the more you manage people, the more you manage money. Yes. And the further you get away from what your core competency is. And those hard questions around money aren't going to be avoided. They're going to follow you wherever you go, whatever industry you're in, whatever job you have, whether it's personal, professional. Those questions around how you manage people and how you manage money are going to be the litmus test of your success as you grow in whatever industry you're in, because it's vital. The two biggest resources you need to be successful anywhere are just managing the people and managing where the money goes.
Human capital and financial capital. And it's not to take away from what we do in ag is produce. I mean, we are all about production, but
and in ag, you throw in agronomic integrity.
Yeah,
so
then really, but as you said, from the business side, it's managing human capital, managing financial capital. Speaking of money, if you want to make more money on your property, you're a landowner or you are a farmer, and that's why you're listening to the Business of Agriculture podcast. If you want to make more money on your land, I can help you do this. I can't, but Nutrien can. Nutrien comes to me and they say, we want to sponsor your podcast. I'm like, that's fantastic. What does Nutrien do? Well, Nutrien is focused on supporting farmers at every stage of the sustainability journey to help plan, make, and maintain regenerative management practices to improve agronomic, economic, and environmental sustainability of your operation for the long term. So what we're talking about is carbon programs. We're talking about nitrogen reduction programs. If you've got the property and you want to increase a new revenue stream, you can get now nitrogen money or carbon money by using less or taking it from the atmosphere and putting it into your soil. This is a new revenue stream for agriculture. If you want to learn more about it, go to TruterraAg.com, TruterraAg.com. Okay, so what we're talking about here is a pretty big change. Now, we just said interest has gone way up. It hasn't hurt land sales. What the hell's going on? Every year I bring on a financial person like you and I say, what's going on out there? I see it from my perspective, but you're knee deep in it. Are farms ready to go broke? Are we overpaying? Is there an equity? Is there going to be an equity squeeze? What do we got?
When I look at the marketplace, I see a couple things. I always take solace in the fact that the world needs food. The world needs commodities more than ever. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we have to be more efficient with the manner in which we bring food to the world. And whether it's the sustainable ag practices, whether it's just the fact that we need to farm less land with more intelligence and better agronomic practices. But, those things are givens. And what changes and what's not always linear is how the market tracks against that. And we've seen peaks and valleys in commodity prices in the last few years. We've seen 2 years ago with COVID, we've seen supply challenges and rapidly rising prices. And now this year we see softening prices. We see rising interest rates with those softening prices. If you were to ask me, what's going on in the marketplace, well, there are so many people that get paid and make their livelihood off of just watching that market. Ag economists, our land grant institutions, those are the experts that might be able to say what's going on better than I can. But what I can say is that I recognize that what we're seeing right now is a historic rise in interest rates. That's the one thing that I can impact positively. I can't necessarily in my role control commodity prices. I can't control the economics of inputs and equipment prices, but I can look at the interest rate market and know that we've got a rapid rise, and that the average farmer, whether it's a corporation or whether it's a small family farm, are certainly going to feel the impact of the difference of what the year started off with versus where the year ended up with because of the lack of predictability. We knew interest rates were going to rise. We didn't necessarily know how much, and that rise has a direct impact to the bottom lines that our farmers are going to face here at the end of the year when they look to say, how did weather impact my crop? How did cultural practices impact my crop? Did I spray that fungicide? Should I have not have sprayed something? Did I need a nutritional application? All of those need to be justified to that gross profit at the end of the year, albeit with the with the rise in interest rates that are accumulating with it, and that's going to jeopardize the potential for bottom line profit.
I know, and you're almost starting to sound like one of those guys that doesn't give me an answer. I asked you if farmers were going broke, if there was an equity squeeze, if we were going to have calamity, and you know what? I was going to pull the whole. What is it? Standing in a theater and yelling fire. I don't think that, by the way, and you don't either. But I think it's not fun to make fun. I lived through the '80s. I'm a little older than you. Trust me, I saw the carnage. And I was just a kid, and I mean, it was awful. So I'm not making light. I'm more just like, God knows if you're around enough ag people, oh shit, we're all they like to go down the. So anyway, before we talk about what the real situation is, you just said we've seen historic run up in interest. Take me back, because I like the history of economics and history of agricultural economics. One of the things that washed people in the 80s was not a very good equity position. Well, it's three things. And I mean, you might dispute me, but I think in general, any of us that are economically minded, we had a huge run up in interest. But it wasn't all at once. It was high interest from the 70s on. It's just that we became almost accustomed or maybe even desensitized to high interest. We had an absolute collapse in land values, but it was kind of commodity driven, if I'm not mistaken. So was it? And then I know that poor Jimmy Carter got blamed for the wheat embargo situation, which was, I'd say, a minor player in the whole thing. So collapse of demand for commodities, which collapse in prices for commodities, collapse in land values, and then a bad equity position. There was a lot of over-leveraged farming assets. Is there something I missed when I was talking about what led to the problem in the 80s?
No, I think you're right. And you asked some good loaded questions here, so I'll be as direct as I can. And
I give lots of loaded questions. That's why people tune in to listen to this. That's why people tune in to watch this. And by the way, if you're listening to this, remember, we're on video also on the Damian Mason YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, type in Damian Mason. We're also on Acres TV, great new streaming ag media platform created by the Hefty Boys, Acres TV. Okay.
And you mentioned a couple of things that I think are different than what you might have noted in the 80s. Land values are high, right? Versus that land collapse. You've seen stories of ridiculously high land sales in certain areas and land bids, and that's you hear those every once in a while, and you wonder how people can cash flow those. For those high of a price.
Happening right now. Happened. We had the run up. John, 06 to 013 was a run up, and we had the same sort of irrational behavior on farmland prices and rent bids. And we're seeing it again starting about 20, I guess it was. Things got a little crazy out here. So yeah, we're seeing it. And you said that land values weren't high back in the old days. They were until 81 or so. And then it was a big washout. And I don't think we're there now. What do you think?
I don't think we're there either. I think it's the land values are high, coupled with the fact that there's still profitability in ag. We've come off a few years of very high and profitable commodity prices. I think farms are generally in good shape. I think there's times where we need to revisit those economic plans. One of the things I usually coach on is that we can't always assume that what we've done to be profitable is the means that we need to continue to go on. We have to look and say, well, these are the steps that we've taken to be successful the last few years, but does that work in today's climate? Because as you know, things in ag can change and pivot at a moment's notice, whether it's a weather event, whether it's economics, land values changing. There's so many different variables. I think it's critically important that the biggest takeaway is that for your listeners, for farmers in general, is that they take time to revisit those plans, because you can't base your year off of everything that you did last year to be successful and expect the same result.
No, that's a big number. Okay, then let's go ahead and talk about, first off, the run up in interest. It didn't. Has there been a time when we increased interest rates this quickly, this quickly?
I haven't seen it in my lifetime, but there prior to that, if you look at historicals, there were some fast run ups, but this is historically fast, I think, for the last few decades.
We had my family was not well off. We started to be in a better financial position. And in 1981, my parents bought a 50-acre chunk of ground across the road from us because it's that old thing you got to have. Well, somebody going to put a house trailer park in there. Never happened. Peak land prices, 18% interest. Within 12 months, maybe within 6 months of doing that, the land was worth less than half of what it was. And 12 months later, it was worth less than half of what they had paid for it. And we still obligated an 18% loan. We made it. My brother and I like to point out that we made it. We paid that payment. We're at half or 1/3 of those interest levels. We're talking 14 to 18% money back then. Now we're talking land probably 8. Good God, will we get to 14 again?
Not that what I'm seeing, and again, I think the individuals that are in the best shape, obviously, are the ones that own land. But not everybody owns land in this economic climate, and it's hard to grow if you expect to own everything. But from what we're seeing, I think we're hopefully at the peak of some of this, plus or minus a few basis. I don't see it going up to the 14 ranges, given what I've read and what I've seen. But I can always be wrong as anybody. I hope not.
Okay. What about the position in the American farming industry? The word was, when we got in trouble in the 80s, it was because there was a lot of assets that were completely leveraged, like 10 to 20% equity. And I heard this discussion in the 06 to 013 run up that one of the ag credit groups I was speaking at, their conference said, we're at like a 35% debt to equity position across all of our books. I don't think it's quite that good now, but you tell me, what do you see? What do you hear from the financial people? The debt to equity position across the books.
That's interesting. That's something that in my end, I don't see as much as maybe those that have the global credit view in our organization. What I can say is I think lenders are a little bit more aware of some of the economic pitfalls and have better resources at their fingertips to be able to look and judge those ebbs and flows, and are a lot more savvy in just understanding where the market trends might be now than maybe in the past. I think again, we've had housing market crashes in the last decade. We've had recessions. We've seen where markets have been. So hopefully, if and when we get closer to the brink of something, we're better positioned, and ultimately our growers, our customers, are better positioned than they were in the past. I think there's one of the biggest challenges is now, given just the costs of land, given the interest rates, is succession planning. That's a whole other challenge that we see as the farm economy ages and looks to turn over and transition. I think that's the biggest challenge that we'll face in this next generation, is just the changeover of the next farmer, hopefully knowing that we won't see the large scale drop in land values and other things that we've seen in the prior generation.
Will the money be there? This is something, an episode that just released of the Business of Ag podcast. I had on a farmland investor. And there's this cry out here that you hear from folks. The young people can't afford to buy anything because these institutional investors are buying it up. I don't know that that's completely true. There's still a lot of acres that are owned by, individuals and families, et cetera. But is the money going to be there for the 30-year-old right now, the 25-year-old right now? If we're obligating these kind of interest rates, is this going to be? Is this doable? Is this doable?
I hope so. That's the American dream, right?
The capital requirements are big.
Yeah, and there's companies there that are dedicated to helping young farmers grow and providing the clarity. And I think it starts with a couple of things. You mentioned the large corporations. The large corporations are buying a lot of land. There's still a relatively small percentage, given the entire land population that's dedicated to agriculture.
Yep.
There's a lot of land out there. There's a lot of land to be had. Now, is it the right ground? Is it the right price? That's all the variables that you reach at localized marketplaces. But in the future, the most important thing I think is people look to purchase land is making sure that they're starting off the right way, that they have their story straight, what they want to do with it. It's one thing in the past to say, I'm going to go in and I'm going to farm and I've got, land here and my family's given it to me, versus I want to go buy land now as a young farmer. I want to walk in and command a price and a value, whether I'm purchasing it, whether I'm renting it, and making sure that I can have the right marketing plan together so that I know I'm going to be successful. It's having that story when you walk into your operating lender to be able to get that first loan that's critical. Making sure that they know why it is that you exist, why it is that you want to farm that land, and how you plan to get there is critically important. And it's one of those stories that I talk with some of the FFA organizations when they come in and say, what can I do to start in this industry? It's a lot like the question you just asked. It's loaded, but it takes doing a lot of those little things well. Most importantly, you start off with your character. You think about the 5 C's of credit. You don't have the collateral. You don't have the backing that you had, that your parents might have had or others in your family. You start off with a story. You have to build that story into success, and you have to be able to grow within the right growth curve so that you don't over leverage yourself and get into the positions that we've seen in prior markets.
I want to ask John Mammon here a question. If there's actually distress or duress at the farm gate, at the farm kitchen table, based on this run up in interest rates, and then the fact that we've got $5.56 corn and $12 and $13 soybeans, as opposed to a year ago where it was $7 corn and $15 soybeans. I mean, we've come down. Our commodity prices are less, and our inputs went up. So there's a squeeze. Is there going to be net revenue? We set a record last year. 2022 was like what, 168 billion farm income. So where are we going to be this year?
I think we're on pace for another profitable year. I think you look at the way we've got a good crop in the ground in most cases. Now we say that, and then we look at some weather experts and here in Indiana, in our parts, right, we got a great crop in the ground, and then all of a sudden you look at a weather forecast and it's where'd the rain go?
By the way, I don't know when you're going to be listening to this, dear listener, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm recording this on the very last day of May 31st of 2023. And yesterday we went out here and did stuff and watered my wife's garden and looked around at stuff. And I walked my alfalfa field, the first cutting to come off. And I said, Lori, I don't like to say it, but we're trending damn close to 1988, the year I graduated from high school. May was a warmer than average May. It started that way about second week of May. And by God, by the time, Memorial Day came around, it was hot. It was dry. There wasn't much humidity compared to most Mays. I'm afraid we're looking like that. So this may not be a great year. It might bring the prices up because the yield's going to be down. That's what you're thinking. Yeah.
And that's where we rely on, and I rely on various experts to look at those pieces of the ag economy. You have to look at our weather experts. You have to look at how that might justify the end price. That's where you need to make sure your capital allocations, your economics are matching your economics for that plan throughout the year. We can't just rely on agronomic integrity alone, especially with the variability. We need to make sure, as you said, Damian, at the end of the day, that it's justifying a net profit. And that's where those pivots have to occur based on the crop. What do you do if you walk out in another 2 weeks and you haven't gotten rain and that alfalfa crop looks even worse? You have decisions to make. How do you manage that throughout the rest of the year? Do you invest more in that crop? Do you apply certain preventative chemicals? Do you put nutritionals down when maybe you just need water? And maybe
and it's even worse. Like we just drove back from Indianapolis, from the Indianapolis 500. I see very little emerged crop, and that which is emerged, and you're talking about the end of May in the Corn Belt here. Very little emerged crop, and that which is emerged isn't emerged very damn well. When do you pull the panic button? When do you push them? When do you pull up the alarm?
Not yet. And I know from experience just driving around this area, we had a cooler spring. We had fair amounts of rain, but it was amazing to see in the last couple of weeks how much actually got planted.
Hmm.
And so, there were great planting conditions, but I think the crop needs to come up, and then we need to see the rain. And just as easily as I would have looked yesterday and not seen a rain forecast for 2 weeks, I look today and there's magically a chance. And so those are the things that I know keep our customers up at night. It's the agronomic piece, and it's the economics of making those decisions, and the cost justification of those decisions.
Not talking about talk to me about the pivot. We're all about money. Most of the money's already been spent. Now you're talking about 2 treatments that you might pull off of that cost you $40 each or $30 each. So you've already got $800 per acre invested, and you might not put in the final 50. So you're still kind of over the barrel. Of course, you hopefully you're insured and you've got some insurance protections, and goodness knows the USDA generally swoops in and at least takes you to break even. So there's probably that.
Well, and there could be more too, right? You talk about those that you trust, so that circle of influence you have within your close advisors, and whether it comes from your crop consultant, whether it comes from your local ag extension office, you're going to be able to review data this time of year based on your crop condition. That's going to tell you what's projected for that extra application of a nutritional. What's projected if you use that preventative fungicide. The biggest challenge that you noted is that you spent a lot, and the cash is dried up. That's where complementary financing, those promotional rates that we talked about that aren't 9.3% like your operating line, come into play, is where you can access low rate financing and those promotional programs that are out there in the marketplace that may seem like a shell game. It's getting the right answers from those you trust, so that you can take that advice and say, well, gosh, if I could use this additional line of credit, it doesn't step in front of my operating line, because, by the way, I may need a new combine this fall because my combine's burning oil or something. And you can go out and you can still use that flexibility. You can still maintain your payroll. You don't have another lien jumping over your operating line that prevents your business from being successful. That's where this time of year it's so important to make sure that you focus on the right agronomic outcomes with the right economic value to get you there. And I think that's what could ultimately drive the profitability. There's, success in agriculture, success in life is never linear. Damian, you did this. Now you're going to be successful. You're going to be made and not have to worry about it. Maybe you've hit that button. I haven't, but it's doing a lot of the little things well, right? And that's where that business of agriculture, as your podcast is appropriately named, is dynamic, because there's so many little things that you have to do right to be successful in this industry. And again, to be that, to reach that net profitability at the end of the year.
So when someone comes into your right now, John, someone comes in and sits down in your office and says, I'm in production agriculture. What do I need to know? I'm not in production. I'm in retail. One of your retailers. What do I need to know? A couple of things do I need to know right now to make sure that I'm successful? Maybe it'll be a tough year. Maybe it won't be a tough year. What's the couple, 1 or 2 or 3 key pieces of advice you give them?
Yeah. I'd say it comes down to 2 or 3 things. What are your objective goals to be able to reach your profitability outputs for your crop agronomically? Are you there? Are you there right now? And if things don't change, are you going to be there this fall? And if not, what do you need to get there? Again, agronomic integrity. What do you need to get there? All things considered, if weather and everything else plays out. Number 2 is, are you in the right cash flow position to do that? Whether it's paying cash for it, whether it's using financing terms. The third would be, what would stop you from growing in the way that you would think you could grow? Because if you're going to pay cash for that versus, again, you started off this saying that there's a cost to that agronomic input, just like there's a cost to money. Yeah. You have to be able to understand both. So if that cost of money is marginally less than what that cost of that input would be, let's go there. Let's make sure the agronomic integrity is preserved. You've got the alternative lines of credit to be there. And oh, by the way, your operating line is wide open, so that if you see an opportunity to grow, in a market, you have the right levers to pull to get you there. Because whether this market cycle is up or down, you know as well as I do, there will be those that will grow in up markets. There will be those that will grow in down markets. It's the ones that understand how to best allocate their capital in the way that justifies the most agronomic integrity. They're going to be able to get there in any given situation.
So on your third one, what would it take to get there? What would it take to?
What if you could get there? What if you could grow at the same time? How would you do that? Because it may not just be enough, Damian, for you to say, "Hey, I'm gonna have a great crop and it's gonna be profitable." You might have ambitions greater than anybody ever thinks. I'm going to grow during this time too.
By the way, it seems to me that in everyone gets excited when things are good. Growth of enterprise a lot of times happens when there's blood in the street, when there's carnage. That's when growth of enterprise commonly happens, and so it's difficult. But that's where you've got to be positioned to grow something in that sort of a scenario, which we're not there yet. And I like I said, I'm not falling for we're going to go back to the 80s. There's just too much. There's too many things that are different. Not to be careless, not to be cavalier, not to be stupid, but I just don't see it. Do you? I don't see it.
No, I don't.
Yeah. Do me one little favor on the way out the door. You mentioned the 5 C's of credit. And I think I only knew 2 of them. And I wrote down 5 C's of credit with a question mark for myself. So for the person that's listening to this that says, "Hey, man, I always like it, Damian, because you bring on people and you ask the questions that I kind of had also, and I didn't want to ask them." 5 C's of credit.
Absolutely. And these are important. You start off with your character. And that's the reputation you have going in the door. Is Damian a great guy? What's his status in the community? What do others think of him, and how is he portrayed?
And frankly, part of that comes from, is he a deadbeat? Does he pay his bills? Then that's part of what you're talking about there. That's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Capital, that's your investment in the ag operation. We talked about younger growers. They don't have a lot of capital. They start off with very little and they build. It's
a high capital, low margin business. And so when you got no capital, and one of the things you're going to have to do is get lots of it. So, okay, what do you got going in the door? Character, capital.
Yeah. Your capacity, and that's your ability to repay the loan based on your current income, how much debt you have, how leveraged you are. You mentioned some of the high interest rate times in our economy. Your capacity changes.
Yes.
Those interest rates. Because again, if you can't get out from under the interest payment on an 18%, APR, you'll never get to where you need to be.
No, that's the tough part. So my capacity, and that's where a lot of people, your capacity to pay, it might be, you might be good for 40 grand a month of debt mitigation, whatever, but not at 3 times the interest rate that it is right now.
It costs more to operate today than it did a year ago, inevitably, right?
Character, capital, capacity.
Yeah, collateral. Those are the property or assets you use to secure your loans. We mentioned that we have programs that are unsecured. Those are lacking collateral versus your operating line. You might have to give a lien position to your crop to be able to get and secure that operating line. You might have to use land and secure your land to be able to get that operating line. And all those things, along with your credit history, your credit quality, go into that total operating line rate that you're showing us from your statement. The other one is our conditions, and those are the things that have maybe changed the most that you can't necessarily control. Sometimes you can. The purpose of the loan might be one condition. You can control that. You want to farm, you're going to go into farming. Yeah. Others are such as the interest rate and external factors, right? We haven't been able to control, neither of us, the conditions of the rise in interest in the last 14 months. And so those are things that all 5 of those go into the ability for you to go in to your operating lender and be able to secure that line of credit. And it's incredibly important that whether you're a young farmer or you're just looking to expand your business, that you have that business plan and you're ready to tell your story of why you exist in this marketplace, and how you intend to get there, and how you intend to, again, repay this and grow. Because at the end of the day, those are the things that are going to make you successful, to give you that leverage, that liquidity. Even if you don't use that operating line, as you noted, you have that behind you if you need it, and you know how to best utilize it and allocate it so that you're profitable. But it's one extra layer of security that you have going into any year in agriculture, which inevitably presents uncertainties.
Anything we didn't cover, Mr. John Mammon, Director of Sales and Marketing at Nutrien Financial?
The last piece is, again, it's making sure that you surround yourself with people you trust. And, agriculture is a big
banker, your accountant, maybe an attorney, maybe a mentor, maybe a peer group, like my friends at Extreme Ag. My friends at Extreme Ag, we put out stuff 3 times a week, 5 times a week, videos that are instructional. And I'm like, if you're an ag, why in the hell wouldn't you be paying attention to what's happening over here?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's connecting yourself. And the most important, powerful question is why?
I think we're going to leave it there. His name's John Mammon, Director of Sales and Marketing, Nutrien Financial. If they want to find you because they say, hey, man, you're so awesome, I want you to come and talk to me, where do they do that?
You can reach out to Nutrien Ag Solutions, and they know where to find me. I'm on LinkedIn, and if they give you my number, I've got one. It rings the one in my pocket, so I'm not too hard to track down. And if you're local in Indiana, stop by and come say hi yourself.
And by the way, I'm going to definitely do that, because his bio, if you are really, he's not one of those pointy headed accountant types. He's actually, and he's not an ag economics guy like me. He's a turf guy, a turf and agronomy guy turned money and credit guy. And he used to work for fancy golf courses. I took up golf August of 2020 when I was not traveling. Now I've got a bug. I like to golf. I'm going to look this guy up and maybe get some favors at some high-end fancy golf courses around the state of Indiana. And, I figure if he's got,
when you find those, you let me know too.
And when he's got a cushy job with Nutrien Financial, he can buy the drinks afterwards. That's what we're going to do.
Well, I don't hit any hole-in-ones, so I won't be buying any drinks for.
Well, I'll tell you all about that. All right. So his name's John Mammon. My name is Damian Mason. Go to TruTerraAg.com and learn more about how to get more off of your acres. It's called ecosystem marketing, and you might be able to pick up some money for decreasing your nitrogen usage or sequestering carbon. Check out TruTerraAg.com. Till next time, thanks for being here, my friend.
Thank you so much.
I'm Damian Mason, and this is the Business of Agriculture. Hey, thanks for being here. This episode of the Business of Agriculture was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You've heard me talk about Pattern Ag because I think it's a pretty cool concept. New technology that allows you to predict the problems you're going to have and therefore treat them before those problems cost you money. What kind of problems am I talking about? Pests and disease. Things like cordon rootworm, sudden death syndrome, cyst nematode, and a whole bunch of other bad things that happen out there in the field that can cost you money. Guess what? Pattern Ag will let you find out ahead of time if the disease or the pest pressure is there, and therefore you're treating it before it costs you any money. What a great concept. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to learn more about their product, their technology, how it can make you money, save you yield, and also where you can find a rep that can come out there and do the work for you. Pattern.ag.